the market of chains. The observation deck of Titan's Edge Station offered a view that never grew old. Marcus Webb stood with his hands pressed against the cool transparency, watching Saturn's rings catch the distant sunlight like rivers of frozen fire. Behind him, the hum of the commercial district filled the air with 1,000 conversations in 100 languages, both human and alien. "Dad, can we get the quantum chips first?" Emma tugged at his sleeve, her dark curls bouncing with excitement. "No, the fabric synthesizers." Sophia countered, identical to her sister in every way except the small scar above her left eyebrow from a zero-gravity accident 2 years prior. Marcus smiled, the expression softening the weathered lines around his eyes. At 38, he carried the kind of tired that came from raising twins alone while working the asteroid mines. His broad shoulders and calloused hands told the story of physical labor, but his eyes held something gentler, something his daughters brought out in him. "We'll get both," he said, checking the credit balance on his wrist display. "But we stick to the list. The refinery contract starts in 3 weeks and we need to be ready." The girls nodded with the practiced understanding of children who had grown up in the constant shadow of budgets and planning. Their mother had died when they were 5, a reactor failure on a transport ship that also killed 43 others. Marcus had been working a deep space mining operation at the time, too far away to say goodbye. He had made 2 promises at her memorial: never take unnecessary risks and always put the girls first. He had kept both promises for 5 years. The market district sprawled across 3 levels of the station's central hub, a maze of vendors selling everything from replacement parts for fusion drives to exotic foods from worlds Marcus had never visited. The air tasted recycled but clean, with undertones of ozone and cooking spices. Overhead, holographic advertisements flickered in languages Marcus couldn't read, promoting services he didn't need. Emma led the way with characteristic confidence, her scanner identifying the electronics vendors in Sector 7. Sophia followed close behind, her attention caught by everything they passed. A Krenethi merchant with 4 arms juggled crystalline data cores. A human vendor demonstrated a gravity knife that shifted direction mid-throw. 2 Valerian traders argued in their musical language over the price of medical supplies. Marcus kept one hand on each daughter's shoulder, steering them through the crowd with practiced ease. He registered faces automatically, a habit from his security training before the mines. Most were familiar types: traders, technicians, families like his own stocking up during station leave. Nothing concerning. They had just purchased the quantum chips when Sophia stopped walking. "Dad." Her voice had changed, gone quiet in a way that made Marcus immediately alert. He followed her gaze across the main concourse to a raised platform near the entertainment district. A crowd had gathered there, but not the excited kind that flocked to performers or demonstrations. This crowd had a different energy, one that made Marcus's stomach tighten with recognition before his mind fully processed what he was seeing. The platform stood about a meter high, illuminated by focused lights that turned the surrounding market into shadowy background. On it stood a woman, though calling her that felt inadequate. She was Valerian, her skin the deep blue of Earth's ancient oceans, marked with the silver patterns that denoted her homeworld's northern continent. Her hair fell like liquid mercury down her back, and her eyes were the gold-flecked amber that Marcus had learned to recognize as a sign of high intelligence among her people. She wore the kind of clothing designed to display rather than cover, fabric that clung and revealed in ways meant to attract attention. But it was the restraints that made Marcus's jaw clench. Heavy metal cuffs circled her wrists and ankles, connected by chains that clinked softly with each small movement she made. A human man stood beside the platform, his voice carrying across the market with the practiced ease of an auctioneer. "Entertainment contracts available for lease or purchase," he called out, gesturing to the Valerian woman like she was merchandise. Fully trained in cultural performance, culinary arts, and personal companionship. Clean medical record, compliant temperament, and "Daddy." Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through Marcus's rising anger like a laser through hull plating. "That's wrong." Marcus looked down at his daughters. Both girls stared at the platform with expressions he had seen before, the same look they got when they found injured animals in the station's environmental sections, the same fierce compassion that made them bring home broken things to fix. "It's a contract situation," Marcus said carefully, though the words tasted like ash. "Sometimes aliens get into debt and have to work it off. It's complicated." "It's slavery," Sophia said flatly. She had her mother's directness, the inability to ignore uncomfortable truths. Marcus wanted to argue, to explain the legal frameworks that made this technically legitimate under station law, to point out that dozens of species practiced various forms of indentured service. But he looked at the woman on the platform again, really looked at her, and saw what his daughters had seen immediately. The way she held herself spoke of dignity fighting against humiliation. Her posture was rigid, controlled, like someone using every ounce of strength to maintain composure. Her eyes swept the crowd with a mixture of resignation and barely suppressed rage. This wasn't someone who had voluntarily entered a service contract. This was someone trapped. "Come on," Marcus said, starting to steer the girls away. "We need to finish shopping." Neither girl moved. "Daddy." Emma's voice had taken on the tone that meant she was about to be stubborn. "We can't just leave her there. Emma, this isn't our business. We don't know the situation and—" "Pick any alien woman," the auctioneer's voice cut through Marcus's explanation. "Prime merchandise, gentlemen's rates, discreet arrangements available." Something cold settled in Marcus's chest. He had heard that phrase before in the darker corners of mining stations, whispered among men who saw aliens as commodities rather than people. It was a code, a signal to those who knew what they were really buying. The Valerian woman's eyes met his across the crowd. Just for a moment, just long enough for Marcus to see the desperate hope and crushing fear warring in her expression. She looked away quickly, but the damage was done. Marcus had seen her, really seen her, and now he couldn't unsee it. "Daddy." Sophia's small hand slipped into his, squeezing tight. "That one." "Please," Emma added, her other hand finding his. "We have to help her." Marcus felt the weight of every responsible decision he had ever made pressing down on him. He thought of his promises, his budget, his contract starting in 3 weeks. He thought of the complications this would bring, the legal tangles, the potential dangers. Then he thought of his wife, who had once stopped their transport to rescue a Garthian child trapped in a ventilation shaft, even though they were already late for a critical appointment. He thought of the values he was supposed to be teaching his daughters. "Stay close," he said quietly and started walking toward the platform. The crowd parted slightly as Marcus approached, responding to something in his bearing. He had the build of someone who worked with heavy equipment, and years of managing mining crews had given him a presence that people instinctively respected or avoided. The auctioneer noticed him immediately, his professional smile widening. "Interested in the Valerian?" the man asked. His name tag read Draven Cross, with the designation licensed contract broker beneath it. "I can offer very competitive terms for someone looking for quality companionship." Marcus ignored the implications in that statement, focusing instead on the woman. Up close he could see the subtle signs of mistreatment. The chains had rubbed her wrists raw in places. Her skin had the slight dullness that came from poor nutrition. There was a fading bruise along her jaw, barely visible against her blue skin. "What's her name?" Marcus asked. Cross blinked, momentarily thrown by the question. "Her designation is." "Her name," Marcus repeated, his voice dropping into the register he used when a crew member was about to make a fatal mistake. The Valerian's eyes snapped to his face, surprise breaking through her careful mask. "Kyra," she said, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her species. "My name is Kyra." Marcus nodded to her, a gesture of respect that made her straighten slightly. "Marcus Webb," he introduced himself. "These are my daughters, Emma and Sophia." Both girls waved, small friendly gestures that seemed absurdly normal given the circumstances. Cross's smile had thinned. "If you're interested in purchase, we can discuss terms in my office. If you're here to cause trouble—" "I'm interested in seeing the contract," Marcus interrupted. "The actual legal documentation, not your sales pitch." "That's not standard procedure." "Station Commercial Code, Section 47, Subsection 12, Sophia piped up, her voice clear and confident. "Any contract involving sentient beings must be made available for inspection upon request by a station resident." Marcus felt a surge of pride. His daughters had been reading the station legal database again, treating it like entertainment instead of the dry regulatory text everyone else saw. Cross's expression soured. "The contract is legitimate and filed with station authority. This isn't some illegal operation." "Then you won't mind showing me the paperwork?" Marcus said evenly. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. The crowd had grown quieter, sensing drama. Marcus was aware of his daughters standing close beside him, of Kyra watching with barely contained hope, of the decision point he had reached. Cross finally gestured sharply to an assistant. "Bring the file." While they waited, Marcus looked at Kyra again. "How long have you been in this contract?" 14 months, she said quietly. 3 years remaining on the term. "What was the original debt?" "Medical expenses from an accident that never happened," Kyra said, bitterness edging her musical voice. I was researching viral treatments at the station's xenobiology lab. Someone fabricated records showing I caused contamination. The cleanup costs were charged to me. Marcus's eyes narrowed. That's fraud. That's business, Cross interjected, returning with a data pad. Here's the contract. Legally binding, properly filed, and none of your concern unless you're making an offer. Marcus took the pad and began reading, his daughters leaning in to scan the text with him. Years of reviewing mining contracts had taught him to spot inconsistencies and problematic clauses. It took him less than 3 minutes to find 5 separate violations of station labor law. This contract is invalid, Marcus said flatly. Cross laughed. You're not a lawyer. No, but I've filed enough labor disputes to know illegal terms when I see them. The debt calculation includes compound interest rates above station maximums. The working conditions clause violates minimum health standards for Valerians. And there's no provision for contract review or appeal. Those are technicalities. Those are laws, Emma said firmly. Marcus looked at Kyra. Did you sign this voluntarily? I was told I would be arrested if I didn't, she said, her voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could see in her hands. I was alone, no family on station, no resources to fight. Something crystallized in Marcus's mind. He thought of all the times he had seen injustice and walked away because it wasn't his problem. He thought of his daughters watching him make this choice. He thought of the kind of man he wanted to be, not just for them but for himself. I'm invoking station commercial dispute protocol, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the platform. This contract is under challenge pending legal review. Cross's face flushed dark. You can't just. Section 63, subsection 8, Sophia supplied helpfully. Any station resident can challenge a contract on grounds of legal violations. Pending review, the contracted party must be released to neutral custody. Marcus pulled out his own data pad and began filing the formal challenge, his fingers moving through the digital forms with practiced efficiency. Around them, the crowd murmured, some approving, others clearly annoyed at the disruption to the market's flow. This is harassment, Cross snarled. I'll have you charged with interference. Try it, Marcus said calmly, still typing. I'll file counter charges for contract fraud, illegal restraint, and violation of sapient rights statutes. We can both spend the next 6 months in arbitration, or you can release her pending review. She'll run. She'll be in my custody, Marcus said, finishing the filing and looking up. Registered address, verifiable employment, 2 dependents. I'm not exactly a flight risk and she'll be bonded to my household pending resolution. Cross looked like he wanted to argue further, but a station security officer had appeared at the edge of the platform, drawn by the commotion. The officer, a Krenethi female with the four-armed build of her species, climbed onto the platform and reviewed Marcus's filing on her own display. Challenge is properly filed, she announced in the clicking accent of her people. Contracted party is released to challenger's custody pending arbitration hearing. She looked at Cross. Keys. For a moment Marcus thought Cross might refuse. But the presence of station security and the growing crowd made resistance pointless. He pulled a small electronic key from his pocket and tossed it to the officer with barely concealed anger. The Krenethi officer moved to Kyra and began unlocking the restraints. Each cuff opened with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the sudden quiet. When the last restraint fell away, Kyra staggered slightly, her legs unsteady after months of limited movement. Marcus stepped forward instinctively, offering his arm for support. Kyra hesitated for just a moment before accepting, her hand gripping his forearm with surprising strength. Thank you, she whispered, the words thick with emotion. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said quietly. This is just the beginning. Emma and Sophia moved to Kyra's other side, their small presence somehow making the moment less overwhelming. Together, the 4 of them stepped down from the platform and into the crowd, which parted to let them through. Behind them, Cross's voice carried sharp and angry, This isn't over, Webb. You have no idea what you've just started. Marcus kept walking, his daughters close, Kyra steady against his side. He had broken his promise about not taking unnecessary risks. But looking at his daughters' proud faces and feeling Kyra's grateful grip on his arm, he found he didn't regret it. Not even a little bit. They had a long fight ahead of them. But for the first time in 5 years, Marcus Webb felt like he was doing something that mattered beyond just survival. He felt like he was doing something right. Breaking the chains. The walk back to Marcus's quarters felt longer than it actually was. Every step seemed weighted with the magnitude of what had just happened. Marcus kept his pace steady, one hand supporting Kyra's elbow as she adjusted to moving without restraints, the other resting protectively on Emma's shoulder. Sophia walked slightly ahead, her scanner device out as she checked for anyone following them. "We're clear," Sophia announced after the third check. "No trackers, no surveillance drones." "Good," Marcus said, though tension still coiled in his shoulders. Cross hadn't struck him as someone who accepted defeat gracefully. They passed through the commercial district into the residential sectors, where the corridors grew narrower and the lighting shifted to the warmer tones meant to simulate Earth's evening hours. Other residents nodded to Marcus in passing, some glancing curiously at Kyra but most maintaining the polite disinterest that came from living in close quarters with thousands of other beings. Marcus's quarters were in Habitat Section 12, Level 4. Not luxurious but comfortable enough for a mining engineer and his daughters. The door recognized his biometric signature and slid open with a soft hiss. "Home," Emma announced, immediately kicking off her shoes by the entrance as station custom dictated. The main living space was compact but well organized. A food preparation area occupied one corner, separated from the living area by a counter topped with the girls' various projects. A half-assembled robot, several data pads covered in code, a growing crystal garden they were cultivating for a school assignment. A large viewport dominated one wall, currently showing a real-time view of Saturn's rings rotating slowly in the eternal night. Kyra stood just inside the doorway, her amber eyes taking in every detail. Marcus recognized that look, the careful cataloging of exits and potential threats that came from months of captivity. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "The door only opens to my biometric signature or the girls'. Station security would need a warrant to override it, and they'd have to notify me first." Kyra's shoulders lowered fractionally. "I don't know how to repay you for what you've done." "You don't have to repay anything," Marcus said, moving to the food preparation area. "Are you hungry? When did you last eat?" "This morning. Nutrient paste." Her voice carried disgust. Emma made a face. "That's awful. Dad makes real food." "Nothing fancy," Marcus warned, pulling ingredients from the storage units. "But it's actual protein and vegetables, not synthesized paste." While Marcus began preparing a meal, Sophia guided Kyra to the sitting area. The Valerian woman lowered herself onto the cushioned bench carefully, as if afraid it might vanish beneath her. "You can relax," Sophia said, settling beside her with the casual comfort of a child who had never learned to fear. "Dad's cooking is pretty good. And once you eat you'll feel better. That's what he always tells us when things are bad." "Does it work?" Kyra asked, a hint of amusement breaking through her tension. "Sometimes," Emma admitted, joining them. "Sometimes you just have to feel bad for a while first. But the food helps anyway." Marcus listened to his daughters engage Kyra in conversation while he cooked, asking about her homeworld and her research with genuine curiosity rather than the invasive questions that came from treating someone as exotic. Kyra's responses were cautious at first, then gradually more open as she realized the girl's interest was authentic. By the time Marcus placed plates of seasoned protein and roasted vegetables on the table, Kyra was actually smiling. It transformed her face, softening the hard edges that captivity had carved there. They ate in comfortable silence at first, Marcus giving Kyra time to satisfy her hunger before pushing for information. But eventually, practicality demanded conversation. "Tell me about the fraud," Marcus said, setting down his utensils. "The whole story from the beginning?" Kyra took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "I was hired by the station's Xenobiology Research Division 8 months before the incident. My specialty is cross-species viral mutations, specifically how pathogens adapt when jumping between different biological systems. Important work, given how many species live in close quarters on stations like this." Emma leaned forward, interested. "Like how human colds can't infect Valerians because our cellular structures are too different?" "Exactly," Kyra said, clearly pleased by the girl's understanding. "But some viruses mutate. They find ways to bridge those differences. I was researching preventative treatments." "What happened?" Marcus prompted. "There was a containment breach in Laboratory Section 7. Nothing major, a minor airborne pathogen that caused temporary respiratory irritation in 3 species. The protocol is clear: immediate quarantine, full decontamination, incident report filed with Station Medical Authority." Kyra's voice hardened. "But before I could file the proper reports, someone had already submitted documentation claiming I had caused the breach through negligent handling of samples." "Someone?" Marcus repeated. "You know who? Dr. Ven Sorath, head of the Xenobiology Division." Kyra's hands tightened on her plate. He wanted my research. I had made a breakthrough in viral vector analysis that would have revolutionized treatment protocols. But I wouldn't share the data before publication. Academic integrity required proper attribution. Sophia's eyes narrowed. So he framed you to steal your work. And sold me to Cross to eliminate me as a problem, Kyra confirmed. The fabricated cleanup costs were calculated to create a debt I could never repay through normal means. The contract Cross offered seemed like my only option to avoid criminal charges. Marcus felt cold anger settle in his gut. This wasn't just exploitation. It was systematic theft and false imprisonment. Did you have copies of your research? Everything was on the laboratory servers, wiped after my access was revoked. Kyra's voice carried the weight of loss. 3 years of work gone? Maybe not, Emma said slowly. She exchanged a look with Sophia, the silent communication twins sometimes shared. Dad, can we show her the thing? Marcus raised an eyebrow. What thing? The girls scrambled to their workstation, returning with a data pad covered in complex code. We've been practicing data archaeology, Emma explained. It's like regular archaeology, but for deleted information. We can sometimes recover data from networked systems if the deletion wasn't done properly, Sophia added. Most people don't know that station servers keep shadow copies of research data for 90 days before permanent deletion, in case of accidental loss. Kyra stared at the girls with dawning hope. The breach was 14 months ago, but my access was only revoked 12 months ago. If the shadow copies. We can try, Emma said. But we'd need access to the research network. Marcus rubbed his jaw thinking. I have maintenance clearance for most station systems. It's not supposed to be used for this, but... He looked at Kyra's face at the desperate hope there and made his decision. Let's see what we can find. The next several hours passed in focused intensity. Marcus used his credentials to access the research network's maintenance backdoor, carefully covering their digital tracks. Emma and Sophia worked with a coordination that never failed to amaze him, their fingers flying across keyboards as they navigated through layers of system architecture. Kyra sat between them, providing technical guidance about where her research would have been stored. Her knowledge of the system's structure proved invaluable, cutting hours off what would have been blind searching. There, Sophia said suddenly, her voice tight with excitement. Shadow Copy Database, Research Division 7, archived data from 12 months ago. Can you access it without leaving traces? Marcus asked. Already am, Emma replied, her screen filling with file directories. Looking for. Kyra, what was your project designation? Viral Vector Analysis, Project Epsilon 7, Kyra said, leaning forward. There should be approximately 700 files, including raw data, analysis notes, and... Found it, Sophia interrupted. All of it. Every file. The relief on Kyra's face was profound. She covered her mouth with one hand, amber eyes bright with unshed tears. Copy everything, she managed. Multiple backups. Already doing it, Emma assured her, initiating transfer protocols. Encrypted storage on 3 separate isolated drives. No one's taking this from you again. While the data transferred, Marcus pulled up station legal databases searching for precedents. If they were going to challenge not just the contract but the original fraud, they needed legal grounding. Here, he said, highlighting a section. Station Judicial Precedent, Case File 773. A contract based on fraudulent debt is void ab initio. Void from the beginning. If we can prove the debt was fabricated, the entire contract collapses. But proving fraud requires evidence, Kyra said. We have my research back, but that doesn't prove Soreth framed me. No, but it establishes motive, Marcus countered. And if he submitted false reports about the containment breach, there should be inconsistencies in the documentation. Sophia looked up from her screen. I can pull the official incident reports. If they don't match the actual environmental sensor data from that day, we'll have our proof. Do it, Marcus said. The investigation deepened as night cycles settled over the station. Marcus ordered food delivery, keeping the girls fed while they worked. Kyra moved between the terminals with renewed energy, her analytical mind fully engaged for the first time in months. They found the inconsistencies just after midnight. The official report claimed the containment breach occurred at 1400 hours, but environmental sensors showed no atmospheric anomalies until 1630. The 2.5-hour gap was damning. He backdated the report, Kyra said, staring at the evidence. He needed time to fabricate the narrative about my negligence. And look at this, Emma added, pulling up financial records. 3 days after the incident, Soratha's research account received a funding increase of 50,000 credits. That's unusual for mid-cycle budgeting. Marcus felt pieces clicking into place. He sold your research, probably to a pharmaceutical company, claiming it as his own work. The funding increases his payment. Can we prove that? Kyra asked. We can raise enough questions to trigger a formal investigation, Marcus said. And once station authority starts looking, they'll find the rest. But even as he spoke, an alert chimed on his personal comm. Marcus frowned and activated it, his expression darkening as he read the message. What is it? Kyra asked, tension returning to her voice. Arbitration hearing has been moved up, Marcus said grimly. Instead of the standard 30 days, it's scheduled for tomorrow morning at 0900 hours. That's not legal, Sophia protested. Challenged contracts require minimum preparation time. Unless both parties agree to expedited hearing, Marcus said, reading further. Cross filed a motion claiming I'm a flight risk and might try to leave the station with Kyra. Complete nonsense, but he got an arbitrator to approve it. Kyra's face had gone pale. He's connected. I told you the people who backed Sorath have influence. Then we use that against them, Marcus said, his voice hardening with determination. They're rushing this because they're worried about what we might find with more time. That means we're on the right track. He stood and began gathering their evidence into a cohesive presentation. Emma and Sophia helped without being asked, organizing data files and cross-referencing legal citations. Kyra contributed her testimony, drafting a statement that laid out the fraud in clear, technical terms. By 0300 hours they had built a case. Not perfect, but strong enough to create reasonable doubt about the contract's validity. You should all sleep, Marcus said, noting the exhaustion on everyone's faces. The hearing is in 6 hours. What about you? Kyra asked. I'll sleep after I review this one more time, Marcus said, gesturing to their compiled evidence. Kyra stood, moving closer. Marcus, she said quietly, using his first name for the first time. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You've risked your reputation, your time, your daughter's safety. Why? Marcus looked at her, then at his daughters, who had paused to hear his answer. Because they asked me to, he said simply, nodding toward Emma and Sophia. And because it's right. I've spent 5 years playing it safe, teaching my girls to follow rules and avoid trouble. But today they taught me something. Sometimes the right thing and the safe thing aren't the same. And when you have to choose. He met Kyra's amber eyes. You choose right. Kyra's expression softened. She reached out and squeezed his hand once, a gesture of gratitude that carried more weight than words. The girls settled into their sleeping quarters, whispering excitedly about the hearing. Marcus made up the couch for Kyra, providing blankets and pillows. She accepted them with quiet thanks, still seeming amazed that anyone would show her such simple kindness. Marcus did review the evidence one more time, then another, until the station's artificial dawn began brightening the viewport. He showered and changed into clean clothes, the closest thing he had to formal wear, dark trousers and a pressed shirt that marked him as respectable rather than wealthy. Kyra emerged wearing clothing borrowed from Marcus's limited wardrobe, modified to fit her frame. Emma had braided her silver hair in a practical style that looked dignified rather than decorative. The transformation from captive to free woman was striking. The girls dressed in their school uniforms, understanding without being told that appearance would matter in the arbitration chamber. They left the quarters together at 0830, walking through corridors that felt different now. Marcus was aware of eyes watching them, word having spread through the station's gossip networks. He kept his family close, projecting confidence he didn't entirely feel. The arbitration chamber was in the station's judicial sector, a formal space with clean lines and neutral colors designed to convey impartiality. Cross was already there with a lawyer, a sharp-faced human woman who radiated expensive expertise. The arbitrator arrived precisely at 0900 hours. She was a Deltheran, a species known for their analytical minds and resistance to emotional manipulation. Her 4 eyes swept the chamber, assessing everyone present. Let's begin, she said, her translated voice neutral. This is a challenge to contract validity. Mr. Webb, you filed the dispute. Present your case. Marcus stood, grateful for years of presenting mining reports to skeptical executives. He laid out their evidence methodically, the timeline inconsistencies, the fabricated debt, the violations of Kyra's rights. Emma and Sophia provided technical support, pulling up documents on the chamber's display screens when needed. Kyra testified about the fraud, her voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could see in her hands. She explained the research theft, the manufactured charges, the coercion into signing the contract. Cross's lawyer countered with arguments about the legality of debt collection and the binding nature of signed contracts. But she couldn't explain away the timeline discrepancies or the gaps in the official reports. The hearing stretched past noon, then into afternoon. The arbitrator asked pointed questions, her multiple eyes tracking every nuance. Marcus felt the case balanced on a knife's edge. Finally, at 1600 hours, the arbitrator raised one four-fingered hand for silence. "I have reached a decision," she announced. "The evidence presented demonstrates substantial irregularities in the contract formation. The debt claimed as basis for the contract appears to have been fraudulently created. Furthermore, the contract itself contains multiple violations of station labor law." Marcus felt Kyra's hand find his, squeezing tight. "The contract is declared void ab initio," the arbitrator continued. "Kyra of Valeria is hereby released from all obligations. Additionally, I am referring this matter to station criminal investigation for potential fraud charges against Dr. Ven Sorath and others involved." The chamber erupted. Cross's face flushed dark with anger. His lawyer immediately began filing appeals. But the arbitrator's decision was final pending higher review, and everyone knew it. Kyra's legs gave out. Marcus caught her, supporting her weight as 14 months of captivity finally ended. She buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with sobs of relief she had held back for so long. Emma and Sophia wrapped their arms around both of them, creating a circle of embrace that felt like family. Outside the chamber, station security was already moving to arrest Sorath. The investigation Marcus's evidence had triggered was expanding, revealing a network of exploitation that had operated in the station's shadows for years. But in that moment, Marcus wasn't thinking about justice or investigations. He was thinking about the woman in his arms, the daughters at his side, and the choice he had made on a market platform that had changed all their lives. "Thank you," Kyra whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me." Marcus tightened his embrace. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's go home." And together, the four of them walked out into the station's corridors, not as rescuer and rescued, but as something more. Something that looked like the beginning of family. Behind them, the wheels of justice turned. Ahead of them, an uncertain but hopeful future waited. Marcus Webb had broken his promise about playing it safe. He had never felt better about breaking a promise in his life.